So as I said, I'm Charley Martinez. I'm the State Farm and Financial Management Specialist with UT Extension. I'm also the Center Director for the UT Center of Farm Management, and I am a livestock or an economist, and so I have an extension appointment and a research appointment. I'm on the extension side, it's farm and financial, but on the research side, I'm a livestock and meats economist. And so when this opportunity was brought up, I was like, heck yeah, I think I have some stuff that'd be kind of fun for y'all to see. We've been working on this for a couple of years now, and I think it's just now starting to really open a Pandora's box of research for us. And so I'm excited to show y'all what we've been working on. And in full disclosure, I am a beef kid. I grew up about 30 minutes south of Dallas. Now we run cattle about 30 minutes north of Mexico in deep South Texas. And so the way I attack all this type of research is always from a cow-calf perspective, from a Seedstock perspective. And so I think some of the stuff you'll see will be kind of interesting. And so I'm going to start off with a couple of questions, and it can be, they're pretty simple in nature, but they might be complex in the way you want to answer it. But do you believe that EPDs or genomically enhanced EPDs help your bottom line as producers? Yes, no? Maybe a no. Anybody willing to say no? They don't believe in EPDs? Given some of the comments that have happened today, I was wondering. I'm lucky I don't have to have a shield on me to come up here. I'm not going to argue about any of the EPDs. Second question, and it was brought up yesterday. I have eliminate in there, but it could be reduce if you wanted to replace reduce. But do you believe EPDs or genomically enhanced EPDs help reduce or eliminate risk? You're shaking your head. That means we had good extension learning experiences here. So I often ask these questions because growing up, as I said, I was a beef kid, specifically in the Simmental business. I often would look at things and EPDs, and they in the junior association they kind of force them on you a little bit through the tests and the cattlemen's quizzes and things of that nature. And so I often had asked these types of questions, depending upon who you ask in my family. Some people would say no to both of these. Some might say yes or no to one, and it kind of depends. And so I often would, think about this when we start talking about this subject. These two questions, I think, open the kind of the way of thinking a little bit. And so as I go through this now, I kind of want to show you some of the decisions that producers are having to make constantly, year to year, season to season, a little bit. And what I hope is that I lay out a profitability situation that causes decision making every year that people are trying to make when they're out buying y'all's bulls, or if y'all are actually out buying bulls or making a bull selection. And so what I mean by that is that the bull selection is one of the most consequential decisions a cattle operation makes. I think Rowan has it in there on one of his slides where it says riskiest decisions. And also in full disclosure, oftentimes I follow up Rowan in these types of talks, and so I kind of steal some of his slides. But the reason why I also like using this slide is because as a semi-kid, I want to show that I actually do we'll put a Hereford bull up on one of my slides just to be nice to the Hereford folks, because I do still really respect a really good specimen. And so to kind of lay the groundwork on the importance of this selection and the things that go into decision making, I'm going to assume that people are selecting sires and dams to maximize profits. I think the previous presentation does a good job of laying out kind of the economic decision making that's going on behind the scenes. But from a pure economic standpoint, when we're making decisions, we're maximizing profit. And I'm not, I know that there's people out there that probably buy from y'all that have glorified lawnmowers, maybe some tax write-offs. I understand that. But in a true economic sense, everything that I do from a research and extension standpoint, it revolves around maximizing profits. And so when they're out there selecting sires and dams, they're selecting for physical traits or genetic traits that they like for their herd, right? Whatever direction that they're trying to take them in, those two are the foundation of their selection. And so when it comes to the bull side, the bulls that they're purchasing is meant to do one of two things: breed heifers or breed cows, sometimes both. But I do think that it's important to recognize that there's no one truly optimal bull. And I think if you know enough of the cattle people that have been around long enough, they would argue sometimes, I have a bull that can do both. he probably could do both, but he's not the most optimal on either end, right? He can probably get the job done, but he's not the best for that job. And so when we're out selecting bulls, whether it is for out of a catalog or for semen, or actually physically picking out a bull or selling a bull, I think it's important to recognize these two characteristics. And so that kind of puts the bull from a development standpoint in two buckets, one of two buckets. They're either being developed to sire calves with lighter birth weights that reduce calving difficulties, or the other one is to maximize weaning weights when we go off to sell, and so higher birth weights. And so therefore that presents a true economic problem here. There's a trade-off that someone has to make whenever they're making a decision. Either they're going to select a bull that's going to be siring lighter calves with reduced difficulties but higher weaning percentage, versus a bull that has the probability of weaning off higher weights and higher birth weights, but also a lower weaning percentage. And so there, from a classic economic standpoint, this presents a unique situation. And also at the same time, when people are making decisions, I think they constantly are making decisions, and it gets kind of lost a little bit that they make decisions year to year. And if I pull this out on purpose for the last 10 years, if anybody was selling animals or marketing animals in 2013, 2014, 2015, it was a good time then, right? Everyone was making money. You take a 300-pounder and get $1,000. It was a really good time. And so if you think about that, though, we're kind of creeping in, and I realize I have a laser, so if you think about it, we're starting to creep in back towards those price levels, right? But the environment that we're in is two different environments, right? So what I mean by that is, in 2013, 2014, 2015, think about your input prices versus now. And so while prices have gone up, profitability has not necessarily gone up as well, right? Profit margin has increased over the last couple of years, but nowhere near the profit margin that we saw in 2013, 2014, 2015. And so the one thing that I want to mention about this is, though, if you think about it, how many of y'all still have females that are in your herd that were born or y'all bought around 2014, 2015, 2016? Do y'all still have a lot of those animals, right? And so if we think about the last 10 years and we still have animals that were around during the last big peak, shouldn't we be thinking about our decisions from a long-term perspective versus year to year, or maybe a couple of years? Probably more towards a 5 to 10 year planning horizon. And so if we think about that from that perspective, the decisions that we're making today have possibly 10 years effect on our herd personally in the next 10 years, but also think about your customers. The decision that they are making to buy your bull can have lingering effects. And what I mean by that, and so this is a 500 to 550 steer and weight heifer, or 5 to 550 pound heifer and steer prices, just to show you that we're still kind of in the same horizon for the 7 to 7.5 weights. When we start thinking about that, the price that we see has a lot of different effects, or it has a lot of components. And oftentimes as economists, we get asked about price. Where's price going to go? Is it going to go up, down? That's constantly the question that they're asking. And in classic, either extension or economist answer is, well, it depends. And why it depends is because of the 5 buckets that you see. We have genetic characteristics, management characteristics, marketing characteristics, market conditions, and external factors. But each one of these buckets also have things that affect what happens in the price. And so the reason why I bring this up is, as we're making a decision where we're constantly having to think about long-term, if we put it in the context of long-term decision making and the price that we receive every year, these first 3 buckets are items that we possibly could control. And in the cattle market, in the cattle business, I would contend that if you're a cattle producer, you're probably more risk-loving than you realize. Because you're in a market, you're selling animals, whether it's a bull or feeder calves or load lots or what have you, but the price that you receive, you essentially really have no majority control over that price, right? You kind of have to market the animals and take whatever happens. And so whether you're getting a bull ready and you have a bull sale that has 70 bulls, for instance, and then you have a sale set 8 months in advance, and then you get to sale day, and what happens if a freeze happens? What happens if a war breaks out or COVID-19 hits? We're still in a risky business. And so that's what I mean. If you look here at the bottom right, it says external components influence external factors. I think that's one of the biggest things we forget sometimes is that we're in a risky business. And so if you put in risk along with all these decisions that we're constantly having to make from a year-to-year or season-to-season basis, that presents a lot of challenges whenever people are making decisions in their buying nature. And so one last thing to kind of drive home that I think often gets kind of lost a little bit for cattle producers is if you're selling bulls to a commercial cattle producer, in their grand scheme of things, they're trying to help their profitability. They're truly trying to maximize profits. And so what I wanted to show y'all, and kind of from a little exercise standpoint, is kind of give you an indication of when they're out buying bulls from you, at what point can they expect some type of profit? And you can also do this for yourself at your operation. And so what I've done is I've taken a female here that is a 700 pounder on average in Kentucky right now is worth $1,300 as of a month ago. I will at least give that caveat. A 700 pounder was worth about $1,300, and that's with her being in your herd as valued as a replacement female. And we know that that's truly also not a part of her total cost whenever we keep her and retain her and put her in production. And so you can think about this from a Seedstock or commercial perspective. On this left-hand side here is $650, $750, and $850. That is the variable cost per year for this female that we're going to retain. And so, or your customer might retain. And so in the first year, they're investing anywhere from $1,950 to $2,150 on this female, or for one female, for the next 10 years, given the fact that she's going to calve on time, every time, and do her job, key to longevity. And so the reason why you see 1, 2, and 3, and 4 bolded is because I believe that in the current price environment and kind of the market signals that we have, I believe that for the next 4 years, 3.5 to 4 years, I think we're still going to be within the 2013 to 2015 prices. There's no indication that shows that prices are coming down anytime soon. And so I've said, okay, if we can have that, we need to think about her expected revenue. And so using the 2013-2015 average over that time frame for a 550-pound calf, which is roughly $200 per hundredweight, we can take that and multiply that with her calf every year minus the variable costs. And so we develop a revenue stream of expectation of this female. And then the year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 there that you see is not bolded is when I think we'll start seeing prices go back down, roughly back to what we've seen in the previous slides where it flattened out, which is around $145, $150 per hundredweight. And so this is her estimated break even over her lifetime given her variable cost, with the range of variable costs. And so if you look here, number 6 to 7, year 6 or 7 right there is the first time you see a green number. That's when she actually starts to generate profit, giving her variable cost and her initial investment. And so if you look at this from just a pure farm management standpoint, if your cost is at $750 or $850 per year on a variable cost standpoint, we really don't see any green. And so this is on the average that commercial producers are going to have to face for the next 10 years. One way that you could also adjust this to get to this green number faster, of course, is the variable cost. Some of our producers, especially around here where we actually have grass, their variable cost might be a little higher, and that's okay. And so they probably get to that green number earlier. If I said higher, sorry. Yeah, if it could be 550 to 450, somewhere around in there too. The other thing I want to highlight is the revenue expectation. This is based on the average that we see across Kentucky in the markets. If you're someone that is selling bulls, generating cash flow in that way, or selling load lots, or if you're a commercial producer selling load lots, or marketing through a graded feeder calf sale, those prices are going to be higher than the average, right? So we could also adjust it that way. But one of the things I want to highlight that kind of from a commercial perspective and from a Seedstock perspective that I think often gets lost is that box that you see in year 6 and 7. This box that you see is something that if you were to do the same exercise anywhere in any other state in the country, you would see the same box being squared up where year 6, 7, and 8 is the likelihood of starting to see a green number. Year 6 or 7 is not kind of taken out of the air to a certain extent. There's a certain EPD out there that highlights year 6. Does anybody know it? Stability, which is the, what is it? What do you know? You know what the definition of the stability EPD is? The probability of her being in your herd after year 6, right? And so, from a marketing standpoint for y'all Seedstock producers, a stay EPD is pretty viable to a commercial person, because if we had two females where one was 20 and one was 2, a stay EPD of 20 and a stay EPD of 2, the person that the one that has the 20 has an 18% chance of being higher, or 18% higher chance of being there after year 6, what gives you a probability of being more profitable for that producer, right? And so EPDs like that, I think commercial producers often forget when they do just simple break-even analysis and sensitivity to the given environment. And so if we start thinking about the break-evens that these producers are having that you're marketing towards, but also the trade-offs that I mentioned, that decision to come to you to buy a bull, for instance, becomes pretty consequential, right? To Troy's point earlier, risky. Are they willing to gamble with you a little bit on your bulls? And the reason why is the decisions that people make on their herd, especially if they're kept in replacement females, the last 3 decisions have lingering effects. The sire, the dam sire, and the dam's grandsire. So the last 3 options that they picked over that time frame have effect on what they're seeing in their herd today, right? To your point earlier, dry matter intake. What happens if you put pressure on dry matter intake or some type of efficiency on a cow base? This could also adjust this number or these break-evens that people see. And so if we start thinking about that, those last 3 decisions that they make or you make in a setting, in a bull buying setting, has impact. What also happens is that there's challenges along with it. One of the big, we have a list here. The first one is bulls have an outsized footprint, which means, if you think about the last slide there, where your last 3 decisions have impact, or the last 3 decisions that someone makes that's buying from you has impact, that's what that means. Bad purchases can hamper a herd in the long run. What I mean by that is they could have financial implications or management implications, but I'll give you an example. I bought a bull about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, in Fort Worth. And I bought him. I saw him, in person. I was like, "Yep, that's him. Let's get him home." He went home. He was still young. We kept him in the pens. And when we turned him out, the first thing he did was go tear up our fences and gates. He was pretty nuts. And so I contend that I saw a bull that was hyped up on Ace. That's what I told my father-in-law that day. I was like, he was not crazy. I literally was sitting there in the ring with him. But from a financial standpoint, that hurt us, right? Fixing fence, that's what I did all Christmas that year, was fix fence and replace gates, because that was the problem I caused, is what I was told. So I did it. So I did that. But there's financial implications for that, right? Gates ain't free, fence ain't free. My time, in my opinion, is not free. And so we have to charge ourselves for that. But also, if you make a wrong decision with a bull that has dystocia issues, or doesn't wean off great calves in terms of weight, those decisions have impact. Our search space is huge. If we think about where we buy bulls from, I'm not scared if we're in deep South Texas, I'm not scared to go up to Ohio to find a bull. I'm not scared to go to North Carolina to find a bull. I'm not scared to go to Wisconsin. If we think he matches what we need, we'll go get him. And so that's where, from that standpoint, our search space is huge. And then I hope I've laid out a good foundation from a profitability standpoint, the kind of decisions that these producers are having to make in the long-term way of thinking. Depending upon the herd, there's a lot of traits that matter for overall profitability, so therefore there's also a lot of right answers for the producers from a buying standpoint. And then number 5, balance in market segments. If your customer's endpoint is weaning, that's totally different than their endpoint being through the feed yard, right? And so from that standpoint, you have a lot of different options that occur, and I think y'all have seen that throughout the day. And so, if we wanted to boil it down into a nutshell with everything that matters, what matters, what traits matter to the bottom line, I think it kind of gets boiled down to 4 different things. Revenue generating traits, which are the live calf and wean pounds, and replacement female traits. Those are probably the most common 3 that we see. And so if people are going out to make a decision on a bull, they do it in 2 different ways. One is visual, so your eyes, how people look at things and how they visualize an inspection or appraisal of a bull, whether it's in a catalog that they're selecting semen off of, or it could be a video sale, or it could be in person, but they're using their eyes to make a lot of their decision making. And then the other side of it is selection tools. It could be EPDs that were the beginning of EPDs 40, 50 years ago, all the way up till now, where we have individual performance, could be a selection tool, GE EPDs, and then whatever else our genetic friends make up in the future in terms of EPDs and indexes, right? And so there's all these selection tools that people utilize. And so I mentioned earlier that when I was growing up, I often thought about if I looked at a catalog, or if I was, we were selling bulls to someone, how did I interpret information versus them? And where do we overlap? Where do we disconnect? And if we could understand that, that makes us more efficient with our decision making. And so when I first got here to UT in 2020, this was a question that I had often wanted to try to answer, and was given the opportunity to try to start answering, was how are producers using EPDs? You can interchange that with GE EPDs, whatever, but the question is purely, how do producers use all this information that we give them? We know that eyes matter, but the information side. And then Troy Rowan was hired on in 2021, and that really got the ball rolling for us in terms of trying to answer this. And so the last 2.5 years, we've actually been running multi-year behavioral experiments with folks in Tennessee, Alabama, and some in West Virginia, where we're trying to understand the EPD in the marketplace. And so the first, I'm going to show you a couple of experiments that we've ran, and the first one was, if we think about it, and you can see the title there, Predicting Seedstock Bull Prices, Does Information Matter? My grad student there was lead author, and it took all of us here at UT and some friends from Auburn to pull it off. But pure and simple, does information of EPDs or EPD information matter in the bull market? That was our very first question. And for us, it was trying to lay a groundwork of, our genetic friends have always said that this stuff matters and we should make decisions on it. That's a whole nother question versus, do people even look at it? Do they even use it? Does it help in the market? Does it provide any advantage in the marketplace? And so that's what we wanted to try to answer. And where we started first was economic theory of optimism bias. And so optimism bias is purely, from an economic standpoint, is we have an expectation, which is the top part, where we start here, we get to the finish line, it's pretty smooth sailing. But the other side of it is, when we start at point A, we have stuff that we never thought we'd see before we get to point B. And so we have this, rosy colored way of thinking of how reality is going to go versus what actually happens. And so I've, often thought from an economic theory, I think we have that in the cattle business. I often thought that when people are selling bulls or marketing bulls, there might be some differences in terms of opinion. And what I mean by that is, we have a buyer and a seller and a bull there, and the seller might say he has the next great bull that ABS needs to be calling because they need to buy this bull up and start selling straws on, or whatever your favorite semen company is. But then the buyer could say, no, that ain't the same thing. We're not looking at the same specimen here. And so you have a varying opinion on what is being there between the buyer and the seller. And so this is what I mean from an economic standpoint. They've done this in ornamentals. They've done it in dairies or dairy consumer preferences. They've done all these types of things, but no one had ever done it in the livestock market. And so I wanted to try to see if we could prove this, if it does still hold true in the livestock business. And so how we designed it was, we took people and we put them into one of 4 groups. And so they would randomly be put as a buyer or a seller. And so they would come to the experiment and they would be either buyer or seller, and then they would either get EPDs or they'd get no EPDs. And so that we have 4 groups that we're testing against each other. And so for me, it was, does information like EPDs even matter? But also, do we naturally see any optimism bias between buyers and sellers when there's no information present in the marketplace? And so people would see bulls, and those are videos actually that were presented in the experiment. We had 18 bulls, and so one person would come in, be a buyer or a seller, and either see EPDs or no EPDs. And when they were put in this experiment, they saw all 18 bulls, and they would see a video and some generic information. And in this setting, they have no EPDs, while the other half had EPDs. And so these bulls come from actual sales, some out of Alabama, some out of Tennessee, and some out of Colorado. And we did Charley, Angus, and Sim Angus bulls. And so we took 6 of each of the 3 breeds, and the variation in prices were pretty wide on purpose so that we can get some delineation between the marketplace. And so we put them all in there. And so some had EPD, some didn't, and half of them were buyers, half of them were sellers. And so to try to estimate bull prices, we took the market price for that bull when it went through that sale and what it sold for. And if a person was plus or minus $500, they was considered a correct choice. We also gave everyone $15 cash for participating, and it took around 25 minutes. And then after they got done, we randomly drawed off of one of the 18 bulls, and if the one we drawed was correct, they got an extra $10. And so they got $25 for about 25 minutes worth of their time. And so in my opinion, we were paying pretty good money. And I think that's why we got a lot of participation. And so this is how we try to incentivize the experiment, because in economics, the academia, econ nerds think that you have to incentivize someone to make a right decision if we're truly testing. And so that's how we set it up. And so getting straight to the summary stats, we had 95 in Alabama, or 95 participants from the from the Alabama Cattlemen's Association participate, and we had 69 participants from the Tennessee Cattlemen's Association participate. And we asked a certain question about whenever they're out in the marketplace, do they use EPDs, genomically enhanced EPDs, physical characteristics, or the EPD percentile ranks whenever they're making decisions? And from the EPD standpoint, we had 65% in Alabama, 78% in Tennessee. From genomically enhanced EPDs, we had 35% and 51%. From physical characteristics, which is visually using your eyes to make the inspection, and we had some examples like length of spine, muscle shape, things of that nature. That was what physical characteristics were. We had 88% and 97%. And then the EPD percentile rank, we had 59% and 54%. And so from the get-go, I think one of the most surprising things from our experiment was that when we asked about EPDs, we're at 65 and 78%. But genomically enhanced EPDs, we had 35 and 51%. So basically 1 out of 2 are actually using genomically enhanced EPDs when they're making decisions. When it comes to physically using your eyes, we have 88% and 97%. When I first saw this, I was kind of shocked because I thought in Alabama we'd have at least 95%. It was kind of shocking to see 88%. So that basically means like 10% of the people, if we just take a standard difference, 10% of those people are not using their eyes when they're making decisions. And I asked my grad student who is from Alabama, he's from northern Alabama, I said, what is that? And he just accredited that to just being Alabama. And so I said, okay, I'll take that. That was not in the journal article, but that was his opinion. On the EPD percentile rank, again, we have 59 and 54. And so again, we're back to 1 out of 2 are actually using EPD percentile rank when they're making decisions. And so for me, we have EPDs and physical characteristics as pretty high usage. We have genomically enhanced and EPD ranked, or percentile ranked, pretty low usage, 1 out of 2 on average. And so that also secures job security for the guys that have been talking, and Katie and all them that have been talking this morning, that there's job security out there for them because people don't know how to use it. The other last thing I want to mention is I've often thought that, in the cattle business, I mentioned the risk and our willingness to be risky in the cattle business. I often thought that risk tolerance and your willingness to accept risk, be risk-seeking, risk-loving, often impacts our decision when we're making a bull buying decision or bull selling decision. And so we also asked them their risk tolerance, and what I wanted to find out is if risk matters. And what I mean by that is, in a simple scenario, if I have a bull that I'm selling to you, and I tell you his sire, I tell you the dam, I tell you the pedigree, but he's not been genomically enhanced, I don't even have his EPDs, but I tell you that he's heifer safe. For someone to buy that from me is taking a gamble, right? They're being risky on that gamble. How many people do y'all know probably would still take that gamble, especially if he's only like $2,500 or $1,200, right? People are willing to take it. Their willingness to accept that risk gets pretty high whenever the price is pretty low, right? And so I've often thought that risk preference played a big difference. And so getting...
So the 1 in the 10, which is taking the higher risk?
High risk people are 10s. Okay. Low risk is 1. Yep. Yeah, so we had a 6.27 and a 6.59, which means our sample is a little bit more above the average of risk tolerant. Risk adverse, risk was on the bottom, risk loving is on the top. And so on the information side of things for the bias, we have our buyers and our sellers, and these are folks that did not get EPDs. They were either a buyer or seller, but no EPDs. And the one thing I want you to look at is that there's a difference between the seller and the buyer. That difference is statistically the economic term of optimism bias. Sellers were thinking that they had something that was better than what buyers were willing to pay for that bull in the market. If we give sellers and buyers EPDs, the difference becomes statistically insignificant, which shows that we have clearance in the marketplace of the optimism bias. The optimism bias disappears whenever we do provide EPDs to buyers and sellers. And so for me, this gave us confirmation that that there is optimism bias present without the information, and then information does eliminate some of that optimism bias. It actually makes the market become functional. And so from the get-go, that provides us also with the intuition that information does matter in the marketplace. And then if we look at roles, buyers with EPDs and sellers with EPDs, the one thing I want you to focus on here is the y-axis. That 0.1 is 10%, the 0.2 is 20%. Our accuracy was pretty low. We had basically 1 out of 5 bulls that they were accurate on. And so I want you to put that in the back of your mind for the next couple of slides, or in a couple of slides, that 20% becomes pretty important. And so summary of the first round of experiments that we ran was sellers are consistently less likely to make accurate predictions. Optimism bias is not found to exist when information is provided. High-risk participants have a lower probability of making accurate price predictions relative to low risk. And participants utilizing the genomically enhanced EPDs and EPD percentile ranks showed increased accuracy. And so what I mean by that is, for the folks that were using the genomically enhanced EPDs and the percentile rank EPDs in their decision making that indicated, yeah, we use that in the marketplace, those 1 out of 2 that do, that one person is more likely to be right than the person that doesn't. And so for y'all in the marketplace, I think, whether you believe in them or not, they actually do allow you to have a baseline to make a decision off of to be accurate in the marketplace. And then also the more risk-loving, risk-seeking, risk-tolerant person that you are, the more likely you are to make a wrong decision, which I also think gets back to that point of folks are more willing to gamble in the bull market. And I think that's a function of most folks, if you're in agriculture, I think you're more risk-seeking or risk-tolerant than you realize. We choose to be in the business, and I think that kind of, that wasn't surprising from a hypothesis standpoint. And so after we did the first round, the next question was, if we know that information matters, what information matters? And what I mean by that is, if we are providing EPD profiles to folks and the whole profile itself does have impact. What within that profile matters. And so what I mean by that is folks often say, calving ease, birth weight, weaning weight, or whatever their favorite EPD is, that we hear about that, but no one's ever really seen if or understood if that matters. And so one of the things that we have at UT is an eye tracking lab. And so we established that a year and a half ago, and what it does is it takes a computer screen or glasses. We also have glasses, but we have a computer screen here. Up top there's a camera there. On the bottom, you see these little 2 red lights. Between the red lights is actually it's an infrared bar. And what that does is when someone's staring at the computer screen, we calibrate it to each person, and we can actually monitor eye movement on a screen to see what you're looking at on the screen when you're making decisions. And so I've indicated that I think we know that the eyes matter. This was a chance for us to try to see how much do they matter and what do they do. And so if we did a test run in Alabama at the end of our first experiment, we started doing some test runs. And this person in particular was looking at the back 1/3, the bull's head, its top line, a little bit in its forearm there. But when we put EPDs in front of them, this person in particular was looking at the percentage rank of carcass weight, was looking a little bit at the indexes there at the end. And so for us, that started giving us some type of indication of where do people look when they're making decisions. And so to show y'all a little bit, that little circle that you see there, that's the person's eyes moving across the screen. And so what they're looking at is a Simmental bull there, and this is their mouse cursor down there at the bottom, but that's a full EPD profile. And we hear about these indexes, especially in the last presentation, of how indexes are supposed to take all this information, make it kind of distill it down into an easy decision-making process. This is a Simmental EPD index, and over here on the right is the all-purpose index, and this person never looked once at it. No, we don't have accuracy on there. It was just percentile rank in the actual EPD. And so, another good question there in the future, though. But so this person never even looked at the indexes, even though they're supposed to be better for them to make a more accurate decision, essentially. So for us, it was like, okay, if we have all this, our next experiment, which we've been running this past year, was what are producers using when they make their decisions? In particular, what information are they using when they make the decision? And so we wanted to better understand what information do producers use, which EPDs never get looked at, or are there EPDs that never get looked at on average? Does order of information matter? And what I mean by that is if we take an EPD profile and we look at the EPDs, the number one that right there on the left is always calving ease direct. It goes to birth weight, weaning weight, and so on. Usually we see them in this long line, right? And this one is taken offline, but if the indexes are supposed to be the most beneficial for us, where are they always at? The end, right? How do we naturally read? Left to right. What EPDs are, if you're someone that's been around EPDs for a long time, what are the first ones you start learning about at the beginning? Calving ease, direct. So in a situation where you enter risk, what is someone most likely to do in a risky environment? They're going to revert to what they always feel comfortable with, right? Indexes come at the end. They probably don't understand them the best. And we read left to right, and we're also putting people on risky decisions. What are they most likely going to be looking at then? And so we started asking the question, well, if the indexes are the most important, or the makes it most simple for a producer, could we make the decision easier for them, which gives them more accuracy? If it gives them more accuracy, they're more efficient with their decision. If they're more efficient with their decision, they're more efficient with with their profitability then. And so we started thinking, what if we flip the indexes and what if we flip the EPD profile and put the indexes on the front and the most common ones on the right? And so the other underlining issue about this that I've often wondered is if you look at different sale catalogs, you see a random variation of information that's out there. But you can grab any one of these three that are out there, and there's probably maybe 30 on the right hand, maybe over 100 different numbers on the other two, I would contend that that's information overload. And so if we think about information overload, people then cannot make they cannot make efficient decisions. And so I've often thought maybe this is a way to start thinking about the layout of EPDs and how can, if we can answer a question on which EPDs get used, and if we invert the information, does it matter? Could we then actually help from a cell catalog standpoint, for instance, provide better information in a different layout? Yeah, but I would also contend, is that the order that it needs to be in? I don't know. Right, I think there's probably one of the more straightforward ones that are out there. And I would also contend sometimes you get a cell catalog and the prints, I'm not saying I'm old by any means, but sometimes I get it, I'm like, man, I can't see the print either. So I would also contend there's other layout issues that we could contend or investigate. And the reason why was because we have all these indexes that people have talked about today that, if they're that helpful, how do we help the person, the decision maker, be more accurate with their decision? And so can we use information seeking patterns to our advantage? And what I mean by that is, if we know the first three bullets, can we know the patterns? And increased accuracy gives better judgment. And so could we try to achieve this? And so we put people in 4 different groups. We have normal EPDs and flipped EPDs. And so the flip means that we inverted them. And so half of them were normal, half of them were flipped, half of them got rank, half of them got no rank. And so we have our 4 groups again. And so I've said we've been doing this year. And the things you're going to see in the pictures that are on the slides there, for one image, it takes about 10 hours to make, because it's a video that people have to sit there in what we call areas of interest, AOIs, to make an AOI on a video that's 15 seconds long, to constantly take and monitor that AOI over those frames. It takes quite a bit of time from a computer standpoint. And so far this is what we have. We hope to have everything done, hopefully by BIF. That's my biggest goal. But we've conducted experiments at the 2023 Tennessee and Alabama Cattlemen Association meetings. We also ran one at West Virginia Field Day about a month ago, but their data is not in here. We use Angus, Sim Angus, and Hereford bulls this time. Some of that, I make a joke with Troy that people just don't like Charley, so we need to put Herefords in there. These are the three type of herd sires that we wanted to kind of investigate also from a industry standpoint. We gave everyone a price range in this round. And if you remember, I said that the first round we used pretty wide range in terms of price of bulls that we pulled from, because we were trying to look at just, does the information matter? In this realm, we know that if someone's going to the market to buy a bull next week, they probably can get a sale report within the last month that can kind of give them an indication of what bulls are going to be worth. And so we were trying to give them the price range as a market information to try to help them. And so we did it in $2,000 increments to try to help them pinpoint the sale or the accurate price of the bull. And we put everyone as a buyer. Reason why in this setting was because on the seller side, knowing that optimism bias is out there, we didn't want to have confounding results. And so far, here's what we got. The 4 groups I want you to focus on are normal, rank, normal, and no rank. Normal is normal EPD profile. Flip rank, or flip with rank and flip with no rank. That's flipping or inverting the EPDs and giving them the percentile rank and no rank. Don't really worry about the observation means or max. What I want you to focus on is the accuracy. If you remember the last experiment, we were under 20%. All 4 groups are above 20%. I think that's more of a function of the market information coming into effect. But if you look here, when we flip and give rank, so we flip the EPDs and they have the EPD percentile rank, we've actually have increased accuracy at 24% between the Alabama and the Tennessee group. And so for us, early indications are showing some positivity when it comes to us flipping those EPDs. And so I mentioned that it takes a long time to make pictures, but I put a good amount of them in slides and in the printouts. And the one things I want to show y'all are on the left-hand side are inaccurate predictors. On the right-hand side were accurate predictors. And so the left-hand side, they kind of had the same pattern. These are 2 different people, but they looked at the head and the front 1/3, kind of dipped down into the EPDs and were out. My first indication on that was kind of suspect, but what I believe is that the people or the person that was looking at the Angus up there, I think they just don't like Angus, so they probably were just like, it's an Angus, I'm out kind of a deal. And the same kind of story with the Hereford. If you don't like Hereford, you're probably out. So we have naturally that tendency. But if you look at these two bulls, so this is the inverted EPD profile. You can see that both people are looking all over the body of the animal. But if you look at the heat maps, we actually have on both constant visualization or fixation on the indexes, but also on the calving ease direct, birth weight, and weaning weight on both ends. And so by us inverting it, we actually have more people focusing on both ends of the spectrum. And these two are accurate predictions. These are more examples, and I kind of put them in there in case you wanted to look at it. Just different type of habits that we're seeing within folks looking at the EPD profile. One thing I want to mention is if you look at both of these two here, and you look at this one up here on the top, look where they kind of tend not to look in the middle at these EPDs, right? So in this instance, we have a stay EPD, not marbling, we have a stay EPD, a milk EPD. They don't tend to look there at all. And so that, from a research standpoint, maybe we shouldn't be even including some of those. I would say that we at least need to have the stay EPD. I think that's one of the more economic relevant EPDs that we have from a profitability standpoint for producers. But it's very interesting to see where they don't look. One thing that we don't have on here, just because the slide deck would actually get way bigger, or the memory would, is that on each one of these we actually have the pattern in which they looked at as well. And so in the long run, we're actually going to track the most common first place, second place, and third place and fourth place that they all look at these animals whenever they're participating in the study. And so you have those in there, but so far most common EPDs are used as expected, which is the calving ease, birth weight, weaning weight. The inversion seems to force folks to the indexes, and so it seems to help in the long run. That last bullet point is not accurate. We're pretty much done. I want to try this with some of the students at UT, but we'll see if we can get that done. I'd like to see if they're actually teaching them well at UT and see if they're actually using the indexes. And so the question becomes, from a bull market standpoint, what is the true value from a bull market standpoint? I think EPDs, in my opinion, have value. Genomically enhanced EPDs have value in the marketplace. Does it matter? I think the answer is yes from a consumer standpoint. But the value of that it truly is going to be dependent upon the value of your bulls whenever you're selling them. One last shameless plug. There's a publication that comes out daily. It's called Farm Doc Daily. Out of, if you think of like the Big Ten, it comes out of Illinois, but participants are from Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, that whole region. And it basically talks about daily things that impact their producers. And it's a very good publication, but we have our own problems in the South. And so us land-grant economists got together and started our own version of it. It's called Southern Ag Today. And you'll get things like this. So a very smart person named Charley from the University of Tennessee wrote this one about growth in forward delivery beef sales. And so we cover things like livestock, row crops, farm management, anything that could be relevant to the South, like H-2A workers, and it comes to your email every morning at 6:30 Central. And I will leave that up here in a minute, but if you ever need anything, that's my contact information. That's my office phone that's there in the middle. In full disclosure, my office phone's way older than me, does a really bad job of keeping messages. And so if you call and I don't answer, don't leave me a voicemail because I probably will never get it. Email's the easiest. If you're on Twitter or x.com, if that's what your thing is, that's my Twitter handle. I'll take any questions. I know we're getting ready to get out of here, and thank y'all for hanging in there to the very end and thanks for coming and learning today.